So we have tens of thousands of members in Full-Time Filmmaker. And one of the best parts about that program is actually the private Facebook community where you can go and you can post your work and get feedback from 25,000 plus professional video creators, many of which are making 6 and 7 figures with their video businesses. But today we're taking that feedback element from the Facebook group and bringing it to YouTube. Now, if you don't know who I am, my name's Landon. I'm actually the owner of Full-Time Filmmaker, and I've been making videos for the past decade. And I've actually got 3 quick videos from Full-Time Filmmaker members, and I want to point out some things that they did well and some things that they could improve upon. And by the way, these are mistakes that pretty much every beginner or intermediate videographer is making, including myself, especially in the earlier days. So pay attention to what I'm talking about with lighting and composition, camera movement, editing, and so on. I would be shocked if after this video is over, you don't walk away with a bunch of things to help improve your videos. So let's get into it. All right, video number 1 is from Sebastian. I want to say Sebastian's like 14 or 15 years old inside of Full-Time Filmmaker, and he is crazy talented, especially for his age. So he told me that he shot this video on the Canon R5C with a 24-70 lens, and then he was shooting in C-Log 3, edited everything in DaVinci Resolve. And by the way, just for reference, he said that this is an ad. It's supposed to support the Amazon listing. So let's watch his video.
Life is filled with wonderful little moments, and each one needs to be cherished. At Good Leaven Co., we're here to help with tools that make it easy so you can focus on Grandma's famous family recipe.
It's a cute video.
Good Leaven Co. Sourdough made simple.
Honestly, great, great video. Like, it's actually beautifully shot. I like the shot selection that you had. I think the vibe is perfect for the product that you're selling. Let's go back though, because I do have just a few things I want to point out, because this video is good, but there are a few things that would make it so much better. All right, so first off, love the setting. I love the kitchen. It's nice, minimalist. I think it probably matches this brand really well. But the foreground here, right at the beginning, kind of threw me off. You see, you got this chair, and I know it's a chair because it looks like the same chair that's down here, but it's up so high, like it's not normally going to be right there. So good job, like trying to use foreground for the opening shot, for that establishing shot where you can, but I would say that's probably not the most natural use of foreground because it's a little bit too forced, and sometimes you can cheat it. But if I were to do this again, what I would do is honestly probably get a wider shot of the kitchen, have it be a push-in shot rather than a sliding shot back and forth. Like, we don't need a truck left and right. Like, I would just say simple push-in, a little bit wider. And if you're gonna do foreground, maybe grab like a plant or something you can throw here on the right-hand side or the left-hand, whatever makes the most sense. Now, on the lighting side, generally speaking, I think it looks pretty good. I think it's pretty obvious, at least to me, having done a bunch of these types of shoots, that there's just going to be a key light right here on this side that is just shining right on the talent, which totally works. I think that looks generally good, and you could keep that. I will say though that I did notice on a few of these shots, you get the glare from that light on the tile here in the back, which is generally something you want to avoid. It's hard sometimes depending on your shooting environment, but I do see that reflection there. So what I would probably do to fix that and actually give this scene a bit more of that bright and airy ambience, I would get a really big scrim or just a nice sheet that you can use to diffuse that light. So you can set up a big tall sheet and have the light being blasted through that. And what that does is it gives you a much bigger surface area for your light to shine through. You're gonna avoid these reflections, and you're gonna have a nice, better dispersed light throughout the scene. So I would say swap that out with something like a scrim. And then what I would do to kind of help bring the details back from these shadows, I would grab some sort of a light right here, and you could just blast it up into the ceiling and bounce it off of, because presumably this is a white ceiling, but if you bounce that off the ceiling, you're gonna get a nice bright room ambience. Something that I like, but it also kind of threw me off just a little bit, was actually the sound design on this. Like, I love to see the effort of like trying to find the sounds that match the actions that are actually happening on scene, but they might be just a little too loud, and they probably need to be layered with some other cinematic ambient sounds as well.
Here to help with tools that make it easy.
Like, I totally get what you're going for, 100%. What I would do is turn that down just a bit, the volume of that down, and maybe layer it with like a little clink from the bowl, or a sound that like that spoon thing that she's using might make, right? Just layer it with a couple of other things and it'll feel a lot more natural to the scene. It's a really good practice, I think, to shoot good audio in camera while you're filming, so you have scratch audio to work with, but it's also a really good idea to have a separate audio recorder and specifically grab sounds from the objects and the people who are on set. That way you just have stuff to work with, right? Because finding like these specific sounds online and trying to download them is gonna be a pain. It's gonna be very difficult. So getting whatever audio you can, high quality on set, is gonna help a lot. All right, so another thing I wanna point out here are the camera movements. Generally speaking, I think these camera movements are fine, right? But there are a few shots here where the camera movement doesn't really match the movement or the subject on screen, right? So right here, you have this truck from left, it's going from the right to the left, but ideally you could just have the stove centered. I would probably do a nice push-in movement to show her opening it up and grabbing that out. That way you keep this nice like composition right here. You can still have your leading lines. Like I think the way that you compose this is good. But if the camera is constantly moving, like to the left, for example, it's gonna skew your composition. It's not gonna look good. But if you center it and you just do a simple push in or pull out, motivated camera movements are huge, and they will help your viewer actually stay focused on what's happening on screen. Now, another thing I want to point out is that you have this beautiful scene of a mother and her daughter, and they're making bread, right? It's a really good opportunity to actually switch up the camera movement into something different. And this is going to be a stylistic choice, but generally speaking, I think it's going to help convey the message that you want to have for this video. But if you were to go handheld for some of these shots and throw on like a 50mm lens, for example, with a really low aperture, you could get these beautiful intimate shots that kind of bounce around between what the girl is doing, like mixing this dough or whatever it is, back up to her face, back up to mom's face. Like, you could get some really beautiful shots just to kind of disrupt that sequence a little bit, because it makes the video more interesting, and it's not taking away from anything that's happening. It's just adding a little bit more variation to it. So honestly, overall, this is a great video. There's not much for me to critique, but if I were to do anything different, if I were to approach this shoot myself, I would definitely have just a little bit more shot variation. Just change focal lengths a little bit more often. Go wide, go medium, go tight, maybe even a little bit of macro, right? I think, again, the 50mm handheld would add so much to this story. The 85mm or even more macro, showing the product itself, like the logo of the product, would be awesome. And then probably the biggest thing for me on this video, beyond just like the cinematography, but as a viewer, I don't exactly know what the product is or how it'll help me. Like, visually, we've broken this down and we know some areas that could be improved upon, right? But if you're making commercial videos like this one and you want to grow a video business, you kind of got to put on your marketing cap a little bit and think beyond just the cinematography of the video, but does this actually convey the message that we want it to convey? I think a really easy way to do that with this video specifically is just more interaction between the product and the talent, and again, how that product is helping them make beautiful sourdough bread, because that's what it's supposed to do. So maybe a really tight shot of the bread being pulled off of the mat. You see the bottom of the bread, how beautiful it is. But just a few shots like that, and asking your client before you even shoot, what are the most important features that you think we should show in this video? Like, what's really gonna sell it and separate your product from everybody else's, and see what you can do to actually have that be a part of the content that you're creating. So Sebastian, Great video. All right, this next one I'm just realizing is 720p. So this is from one of our students. Her name is Jaden, and it's actually an older video that she's done. So she's improved a lot since then, but she sent this to me so I could actually break it down and give her some feedback. 2 years overdue, probably ish, maybe even more. So this was shot on a Canon 5D Mark IV on a 35mm lens, and it's actually a little bit of a longer one, so I'm going to cut it up and we'll watch just a few parts of it. All right, Mavora Fitness Retreats, Jaden Alora Films. What a cute logo. So apparently she got paid $1,000 to do this video. Good job, first off, leveraging a connection she already had. She knew the owner. So good job. I mean, getting your first paid gig is huge. Before you start on a video like this, especially, what I would do is ask your client a few questions. It would be, who's this video for? What platform is this video, or platforms is this video going to go on? And then what's kind of like that target duration for the video? There's other questions you could ask, but those are probably some of the most important, because if you can define that, you can very easily figure out, okay, how do I want to frame this video? What story do I want to tell? How do I want to present it? How are we going to structure it? Are we going to have an intro animation? Are we going to have a voiceover, a talking head? If you ask those questions, it's going to be a lot easier for you to throw this together, and it'll make it feel less like a montage and more like an intentional video designed to do something specific. And in their case, I would imagine they would want this video to drive conversions. It's to actually give a potential buyer of this retreat an idea of what they can expect at one of these. So you guys probably aren't going to be able to tell because this YouTube video is 24 frames per second, but their video is 30 frames per second. So presumably it was shot at 30 frames per second and it was edited and exported at 30 frames per second. So it's okay. Traditionally though, 30 frames per second is actually reserved for broadcasts, television, right? Or reality TV. Some YouTubers like to use 30 FPS if they're doing talking heads and tech reviews and stuff like that. But generally speaking, if you're going for a more traditional cinematic look, it's going to be 24 or 23.976 frames per second. I'm also noticing that the shutter speed on this is just cranked super high, presumably no ND filter on the camera's lens, which if you're shooting in southern Utah in harsh light, trust me, you want to get an ND filter for your camera. And really where you want your shutter speed to be, if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, you want your shutter speed to be 1/48 or as close as you can get that, just not below 48. So 1/50 totally works too. So you take your frame rate and then you double it. It's really as simple as that. She definitely was not extracting the max quality out of this camera, and it just kind of goes to show that if you give a pro a $500 camera, they're probably going to make a much more beautiful video than a beginner with a $5,000 camera, right? So the 5D Mark IV that they were shooting on, I mean, that's a 4K camera, but it looks like this was shot in either 720 or 1080, probably IPB, meaning they weren't using the maximum bitrate that they could have been using. And even if you're not going to edit and export in 4K, just shoot in 4K so you have that extra resolution, and then you can scale that down. I'd also say too that I don't know if the 5D Mark IV has log. I actually can't remember off the top of my head, but even if it does, beginners usually aren't ready for log footage. It's kind of intimidating. So if you don't want to use log, what I would recommend is actually just choosing a different picture profile, like a neutral or natural picture profile, and lowering the contrast and the saturation. If you do that, you're gonna have a final image that looks less like the color and the contrast has been baked in. And it's not log, but you're gonna be able to actually manipulate that a little bit better in post. So I'm gonna pause it right there because this is again what I said with Sebastian's video, but what a beginner tends to do, and I'm guilty of this too, right? You see something that looks cool and you're like, I gotta add a movement. And so you just kind of like pan up or whatever. Even if you're panning into like literal nothingness, you just feel like you need to add movement. First off, you don't need to add movement to make a shot like cinematic. A really good practice for any filmmaker, videographer is to let go of your gimbal, let go of the handheld stuff, and start using a tripod more often, because what a tripod does is it forces you to use fixed shots and just focus on the composition, right? Like they're static shots, the camera's not moving, you're not moving the tripod, you are just setting it down and you're finding symmetry, you're finding leading lines and patterns and all these different things to make the image just look visually pleasing by itself. Practicing that first before you move on to a gimbal is actually super, super helpful. So with this rock shot, that's probably what I would have done if I were gonna use it at all. Like you could probably take it out and the video would be totally fine. But if you really wanted to show off those rocks, just set it up so it's a static shot, you know, maybe center the rock, and that's pretty much all you need to do. And there's a handful of shots like that in this video that you could just make static, you could take out completely, you could change the camera movement to just make more sense and be more motivated, right? But that was a big one. So overall, good video. It's not amazing, but it's a good video. I think you did a good job of capturing the stuff that was happening, the events that were happening. And if that's all the client wanted, great. If they just wanted to recap a 3.5 minute recap of all the things that happened, totally fine. For $1,000 for probably a few days of you shooting, they probably got a pretty decent value out of that. They could probably repurpose this footage if they wanted to. But I will say, you probably could have made this video like a quarter of the length and it would have felt just as complete, if not more, with a few structural elements to it. All right, good job, Jaden. I know, again, this video is a few years old. You guys should see their stuff now. It's insane. What do we got next, though? All right, so this is a video from Victor, also a full-time filmmaker member. He shot this on the Sony FX3 with a few different G Master lenses, it looks like, in S Cinetone. And it's a quick, like, I guess, social video that the client can post on Twitter or Instagram if they want to. So let's watch this.
Holy smokes. Hi, I'm Kent C. Dodds. Welcome to my dream studio. Dude, I've got a one wheel on my wall.
Nice. So Victor owns this company. It's called Dream Studio. Basically, they go around and they revamp people's like home offices so that they can film content there. First off, great video. I think it generally does what you want it to do. You want to kind of create a little bit of hype and just show the result and how happy your client is. But there are a few things I would adjust and potentially add just to make this video feel a bit more complete and actually probably perform better for you on social media too. Okay, so something I noticed right here at the beginning is his lav audio that you have right here is actually pretty muffled. Like the highs just aren't there and it doesn't sound super good. So what I would do honestly is take that, open up EQ in your editing software and just bring up those highs. If you bring up the highs, what you're gonna do is actually just open up his vocal range a little bit. It's gonna sound a lot less muffled. Another thing I would probably adjust, and it's not a huge deal, but I would say he probably has a little bit too much headroom right here. And I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get his logo specifically there, but I would actually just raise his chair up. That way he is just sitting up a touch higher, because right now it looks good. Like the lighting looks good for whatever he's doing. I like the logo in the background. I think some of the practicals you have look great, right? But if you just raised him up a little bit, it would feel less like he's a little kid sitting at the computer and more like he's a professional expert and he's here to help you, right? So it's a small thing, but I would raise him up just a touch. So right there, the before and after is cool. I think especially with this business that you're in, like you definitely want to show that and you definitely want to show the final result. But a couple things, okay? So first off, the before you're almost like halfway, or maybe not halfway, but you've already started the reno, right? So ideally the before is showing like what it really looked like before. It could just like take everything out. I think it's worth pulling those ladders out of there real quick in that sheet, and ideally getting the shot before the paint has gone on the wall, right? And then it kind of caught me off guard because there's no sound effect or any sort of transitional thing to help me realize that it was the before, and now here we are at the after image. So if you wanted to do a hard cut of that before clip and then the after clip, throw like a riser in there so it kind of like, and then it goes into that after clip. Personally, what I would do is actually create a mask. So you have your before clip on that bottom layer, and then you have the after clip right above it. And then on that after clip, you can create a mask and you keyframe that, you animate it so it slowly wipes across the entire screen, and you line it up with that previous shot. That way you can like see every detail that went into that room from the before to the final version. I think it makes that last longer and be even more profound. I'd also say too, I would recommend getting several angles like this. Like that main angle is good, but I would get a few, and I would also opt for a wider lens so you can really see the difference, because you're essentially doing real estate shoots at this point. Yes, you're remodeling somebody's office, but real estate videographers and photographers, they're using extremely wide lenses, and so I'd recommend something like a Laowa 12mm lens. That would go a really long way, and it would actually make the space feel bigger. And that's what you're doing. You're selling a functional space. So if it feels bigger, people are going to be more inclined to hit you up. Now, moving through, I'd say some of these detail shots probably aren't crucial to the story. If you feel like you need those details, I would just crank through them really quick and have them cut to the beat of the song or something, because yeah, it obviously adds to the remodel that you've made, but I don't know if you need to like have that be a good 10-15 seconds of the video. Now on this wider desk shot, you can kind of tell that you got these overhead lights on. It looks like this light is on as well, but you also have these like really harsh shadows coming down. It's not that crucial, right? But generally speaking, I would say just turn off those overhead lights. So one of the first things I do when I walk onto a set that I'm going to film at is I'll turn off the overhead lights and I see where my light sources are coming from. If it's natural light, if we have some artificial lights that we can bring in. So turn those off and then really let the artificial or the natural light do the heavy lifting, because usually you're just going to get some gross shadows and weird colors from overheads. I'd also say too, especially if you're trying to like really sell this as a service that you're offering, get rid of the cables. Just make that look cleaner. We've put on our marketing cap. Now we're going to put on our set design cap and just realize that visuals go beyond just your camera settings and the lighting and whatever. Like you have to like really look at what's in your frame, and can we make a quick adjustment just so that looks a bit cleaner too. And I think cables, that's a really quick thing to fix. Again, if you want to sell more of these, I would get a few variations of him in front of the camera doing different things, holding different props, maybe with a different shirt on or a hat. Like show him in his natural element doing his job in this setting, the scene that you have created for him, because the results, they speak for themselves. Like people are interested in the behind the scenes and like what the setup looks like, but they especially want to see the final result. So milk that, like show a bunch of those clips, and then that final audio clip.
Dude, I've got a one wheel on my wall.
I like that it's kind of a candid, raw-ish audio. Maybe you told him to say that, I don't know. But I will say, as much as I like raw audio randomly because it makes it more personable, I don't know if that line really adds anything to the video. So if I were to do a different line instead of like, oh, I got a one wheel on my wall, what I would say is have him say something like, my videos are gonna look so good now. So something like that, because it's still like a nice, raw, candid audio, but it leans more into the results that the client is excited about. He didn't pay you to put a one wheel on the wall. He paid you so that his videos and his content and his video calls look better, right? So just lean into that. All right, guys, let me know if you like this format. Personally, I would have loved to have this as a beginner, just quick breakdowns and just seeing what people have done well, what could be improved upon. And if you're a beginner and you want to get better at filmmaking fast and maybe even have your video featured in one of these, go ahead, join Full-Time Filmmaker. Full-Time Filmmaker is a really great place to expand your knowledge, to connect with a huge community of creators. I threw a link in the description if you want to check that out. But that's all I have for you today. If you have any further questions, please let me know.